Assalamu alaikum. I'm Professor Dr. Hayder Mubarak. This is the last practical session in neuroanatomy. The next practical session will begin with the beginning of the theory of head and neck anatomy, and I will not send practical sessions on the spinal cord. And after this practical session, you need to revise all the practical sessions that I had present to the student in order to share the formative exam and the practical exam, which is counted for the degrees of the success of your examination. So starting with this practical session on the basal ganglia is connected with the cortical and subcortical centers, and it acts by a mechanism of feedback action. It involves generally in control of voluntary motor activity. Components of the basal ganglia are the following. First, the neostriatum, and you know neostriatum means new. It occurs in the well-developed brain of a human. The neostriatum include the caudate nucleus, which we had discussed this nucleus with the ventricles of the brain. It forms the floor of the anterior horn and body of lateral ventricle, and also it forms the roof of the inferior horn of inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. We had previously demonstrated the head and body of caudate nucleus and the floor of the anterior horn and body of lateral ventricle, and we had demonstrated the tail of the caudate nucleus forming the roof of the inferior horn of lateral ventricle. So this is the caudate nucleus, which is the first part of neostriatum. The second part of neostriatum is the putamen. All this triangular gray matter is called lentiform nucleus. It forms laterally of putamen. This is the putamen, and medially formed by the globus pallidus. The putamen and the globus pallidus are called lentiform nucleus, as you can see here. So only putamen part of lentiform nucleus is forming the neostriatum with the caudate nucleus, which is considered as the first part of the basal ganglia. The second part of basal ganglia is called paleostriatum. Paleo means old. This part of basal ganglia is also seen in the lower vertebrates having less developed brain compared to human. The paleostriatum includes the globus pallidus part of the lentiform nucleus. We said that all this triangular gray matter is lentiform nucleus. It is formed laterally by the putamen, medially by the globus pallidus. The third part of the basal ganglia is the substantia nigra. Substantia nigra had been described to you in the sections of the midbrain. We said that the midbrain contains a region which is appearing in sections, upper section and lower section of midbrain, that is called substantia nigra. And the fourth part of the basal ganglia are the subthalamic nuclei. And also we had discussed the subthalamic nuclei in the topic of the diencephalon. There are another way of classifying the basal ganglia or basal nuclei. The first classification was this, in form of neostriatum, paleostriatum, substantia nigra, and subthalamic nuclei. But we have some authors that classify the nuclei sharing information of the basal ganglia or the basal nuclei in the following manner. Some authors suggest that the basal ganglia are formed of, number one, corpus striatum. This corpus striatum is formed of, according to other authors, the dorsal striatum and ventral striatum. The dorsal striatum includes the caudate nucleus and putamen, while the ventral striatum includes the nucleus accumbens. This nucleus accumbens had been discussed to you with the subject of the limbic system. We said the nucleus accumbens lie between or connect the caudate nucleus with the putamen. The same slide had been presented to you in the presentation of the limbic system. So corpus striatum is the first part of the other classification for the basal ganglia. It includes dorsal striatum, which is formed by the caudate and putamen, ventral striatum, which is produced by the nucleus accumbens. And also the corpus striatum is formed by a dorsal pallidum and ventral pallidum. The dorsal pallidum includes the globus pallidus that we had just described. This globus pallidus is sometimes called dorsal pallidum. It is formed of an external and internal parts that will be discussed soon. The ventral pallidum also will be discussed soon in the next slide. Other part of the new classification of basal ganglia is the subthalamic nuclei. Again, substantia nigra, and substantia nigra is considered, which is the colored region in the brainstem section. It is described as formed of a medial part, which is called substantia nigra compacta or pars compacta, and the lateral part, which is called substantia nigra reticularis or pars reticularis. And also the new classification that I'm considering in this slide, consider that the tegmental region of midbrain is also part of the basal ganglia, specifically not the upper tegmentum, but the ventral, not the dorsal tegmental region, but the ventral tegmental region of midbrain. So now I will discuss the question mark here, the ventral pallidum, and I will discuss the dorsal pallidum. The globus pallidus, which is also called dorsal pallidum, is divided into two parts, internal globus pallidus and external globus pallidus. So probably this is the section that shows the two parts, the internal and external parts of the globus pallidus or dorsal pallidum. And these two parts are separated by a lamina called medullary lamina. What about the ventral pallidum? The ventral pallidum is gray matter located in a region which is unnamed. It is not having a name, called substantia innominata. This substantia innominata containing the ventral pallidum lies below the lentiform nucleus. And this is the figure which I had previously presented to you to demonstrate the substantia nigra. This is the substantia nigra, a colored region that's seen in section of upper midbrain and lower midbrain. And here we are reversing this region because it also forms parts of the basal ganglia or basal nuclei. According to the theory, the basal ganglia nuclei are divided or classified into input, output, and interconnecting or intrinsic nuclei. And this is a trial to demonstrate these functions. Some of the nuclei are producing output, some of the nuclei are producing input for the basal ganglia, and some of the nuclei are only connecting different parts of the basal ganglia. You can see that the basal ganglia is just like the limbic system. It is not a structure, it is a connection between many other structures. This is a demonstration to show the caudate nucleus. For a while we said that previously in the previous presentation we saw the caudate nucleus in the floor of body of lateral horn and anterior horn of lateral horn. Sorry, body of the lateral ventricle and anterior horn of lateral ventricle. And also the caudate nucleus is seen in the roof of the inferior horn of lateral ventricle. And I want to demonstrate this in that slide. You can see that the caudate nucleus is C-shaped. This is the head of it, and this is the body of it, and this is the tail of it. This C-shaped caudate nucleus, its head and part of the body form the floor of the anterior horn and body of lateral ventricle. While the tail of the caudate nucleus, as you can see, form the roof of the inferior horn of lateral ventricle. And here also is a coronal section showing the anterior horn of lateral ventricle. This anterior horn has a roof which is formed by corpus callosum, medial wall formed by septum pellucidum, and this is the head of caudate nucleus forming the floor of the anterior horn, and as I said also the body form the floor of the central part of the lateral ventricle. And in coronal section again you can see here the caudate nucleus head form the floor of the anterior horn of lateral ventricle, and you can see also this is the tail of caudate nucleus forming the roof of the inferior horn of lateral ventricle. You can see that the caudate nucleus is separated from the lentiform nucleus by the internal capsule, and the lentiform nucleus is related laterally to a lamina of gray matter which is called the claustrum. This lamina of gray matter is separated from the insula by white matter and is separated from the lentiform nucleus by a white matter. Because this is an internal capsule separating the caudate nucleus from the lentiform nucleus, this white matter between lentiform nucleus and the claustrum is called external capsule, and the white matter between the claustrum and the insula is called the extreme capsule. So we have internal capsule, external capsule, and extreme capsule. The claustrum gray matter, which is a lamina of gray matter, lie in between the external capsule medially and the extreme capsule laterally. Again, here we can see the caudate nucleus is separated from the lentiform nucleus in transverse section by anterior limb of V-shaped internal capsule. The posterior limb of V-shaped internal capsule lie between the thalamus and the lentiform nucleus. But also lateral to the lentiform nucleus, this is the lentiform nucleus, which is formed of putamen and globus pallidus, and you can see the external and internal parts of the globus pallidus, which is the dorsal pallidum. Lateral to the lentiform nucleus in transverse section, also this is the claustrum. You can see this is the claustrum here and there, and you can see that the claustrum separated from the lentiform nucleus by the external capsule, and the rostrum separated from the insular cortex by the extreme capsule. There are many points had been discussed in your theory regarding clinical aspects and blood supply, and I will not pass into these because these topics are discussed in your lecture very well. And that's all for the presentation of practical aspects of the basal ganglia. Please do not forget the claustrum. The claustrum is an important structure that is mentioned here for the first time to you, lying in between the external capsule and the extreme capsule. The function of the claustrum is that it shows connections with many regions of the brain and cortex and basal ganglia, and therefore it is because it is connected to many regions, the claustrum is mainly regarded many functions. One of them important function of the claustrum is consciousness, and as I said, it is separated from the lentiform nucleus by the external capsule and from the insula by the extreme capsule. We can say that it is separated from the putamen by the external capsule because the lentiform nucleus has a most lateral part which is putamen and the globus pallidus, so the external capsule lie between the putamen or between the lentiform nucleus medially and the claustrum laterally. Thank you very much.